Hello, hello. I'm Holly. I love books, I love plants, I love cats. Let's talk about it. So, this will be my first time ever doing a monthly wrap up of what I've read. I've got 18 books to talk about and one DNF, so this might take a minute. So, let's just dive right in. The little bit of a heads up that when I do book talks, I do go beyond just the blurb of the book. I don't give away spoilers, and if I were to, I would always give you a big warning. I do say more than the blurb. So listen to what I have to share if you want to have my opinion on who the books might be best suited for, what I did or did not like, some of the tidbits I think would be helpful to know to find out whether or not you really would be interested in reading that book. I don't really do star reviews. I don't think of books that way. Sometimes they just speak to me more or less, depending on where I am in my life or what I need at that moment. And oftentimes I can see why a book just didn't work for me, but could absolutely work for someone else. So I'll be honest with my critiques, but I'm also honest that a lot of that comes down to me. I don't really want to fault a book or give it a bad rating if I think it has a really good audience opportunity. But I'll be honest about all that and we'll talk about it. So let's get started. I'll talk about the books in the order I read them this month. I started out with a slew of Southern Vibe books, both because I was in North Carolina at the beginning of July and because it is Summerween. The first one I read is Bittersweet in the Hollow by Kate Pearsall. This one is about the James women who live in Bittersweet Farms in Cobble Hollow. The location is a fictional but rural West Virginia town. I did a more in-depth review of this book in my Appalachian Horror for Folkqueen video, which I'll link below. Basically, it's following the James women as they run their family diner, Harvest Moon, and also exploring their magical talents, because each member of the family has their own special magical gift. The main character is Lynn. She's the third youngest of four sisters. Her magical ability is tasting people's emotions, which I thought was very interesting, and it opened up for a lot of curious pairings of what a certain emotion might taste like. The big mystery of this story are really twofold of the same thing. Lyndon, 1 year ago, disappeared at the Moth Festival, the annual celebration of the Appalachian folklore of the moth-winged man. She went missing. No one knows why. She can't remember what happened, but it made the whole town kind of creeped out by her. The story is taking place the next year, and another girl goes missing, Dahlia, under very similar circumstances. This disappearance makes Lyndon have to pursue a truth, figure out what happened, both in her past and with Dahlia. It's a nice mystery story that's incorporating magic and myth and family drama and small town drama. I like the magic system that was built within the story. I like the incorporation of a moth-winged man myth. I won't say anything more about the story, but I was very interested in it. I think if you have any interest in magical systems and folklore and family drama and small town drama, I would definitely dive into this one. Next, I read Lute by Jennifer Thorne. It's a folk horror story that is describing the day where every 7 years, 7 people die as a token to the island to keep the wealth and prosperity of the people. I'm not usually much of a folk horror person. However, I had read Diavola, also by Jennifer Thorne, and loved it. So I wanted to have a taste of something else and give her version of folk horror a shot. The main character is Nina Treadway. She is a native Floridian, but she married into the Treadway family and became sort of the head of that household, who is also kind of the head household of the entire island. Her husband, Lord Treadway, he stepped into that role right when they were getting married. His dad died rather suddenly, and he had to step into that role, and in the midst of his mourning, he meets Nina, and they get married. Nina is under the impression that the day everyone keeps referencing is more superstition. It's more of almost a holiday, a metaphor. She doesn't take it seriously. At this point, she also has 2 children. She's been married 7 years. So she's pretty horrified when she finds out it's not a metaphor. And her husband, Lord Treadway, he didn't really prepare her for it. He's never really been keen on fulfilling this particular promise to the island. So we're at the 7-year mark. It's solstice. The day has come. What I liked about this particular folk story is that the island definitely has some kind of power. A lot of times I feel like folk horror is just reading about some cult practice, and that's not really my thing. I like there to actually be magical components. There definitely seemed to be a power with the island. I totally bought into that. I liked how the island kind of chooses who it's going to take, and no one on the island knows who the 7 will be. My main problems with this book are the ending portions. I feel like the book lost a little bit of steam. It lost some of its own power. It really felt like it was no longer the island and just more of general chaos that was determining things. And the very ending, it could be seen as more of a positive, uplifting, happy conclusion. I felt like it kind of just lost the heart of what was supposed to be happening. I'll go into a further deep dive on this book later, but just so you guys know, if you want a summer read that I feel like was one of the better folk horror stories I've read, I would definitely recommend Lute. Next, I went back for more of the southern vibe, and I read This Cursed House by Del Sandeen. This one's tricky for me. I will just say that I love the story that was trying to be told. It's about Gemma Baker, who is a Black teacher living in Chicago. She loses that job. She's offered one in New Orleans. She travels down to work for the Duchamp family, and just a lot of drama ensues. Not giving anything away, it's in the blurb of the book that the family thinks she is the person who can break a curse on the household. I genuinely just don't buy into the dynamics here. Gemma was unbelievably devoted to this idea of saving the family, and I cannot really accept the explanation for that, why she was so keen on saving them, because they were awful to her. The Duchamp family, in their history, were slave owners, and in fact, they have Black lineage. It's very obvious they want to be perceived as white. They certainly pass as white. Gemma does not. She certainly looks Black. So that racial dynamic is there. And the curse of the house is essentially tackling the repercussions, the pain, the generational trauma of slavery within the household. I was expecting this to be much more a book about magic, about curses, about witchcraft. That's much more my thing. This ended up being more of a book about self-love and kindness and forgiveness. I didn't really care to forgive this family, and it just became almost a melodrama of Gemma wanting to save the family, even though they're absolutely awful to her. It really was more of her emotional journey trying to solve the curse than there was anything about actually taking actions to solve the curse. Really, the only thing that's even mentioned that she's actively trying to do for the months that she's there is translate a book about curses, but she's not even really the one translating it. It's one of the other household members, so she wasn't even doing that. I don't know what she was doing except spiraling constantly about wanting to save the family because she's hoping she'll then be seen as part of the family. I just got pretty bored with that mental spiral. The next book I read, this is just a guilty indulgence of mine. I reread That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. It's part of a Mead Mishap series. This is purely, essentially, a spicy fantasy book. It's ultimately a love story between Cinnamon and Fallon. Cinnamon is a human, Fallon is a dragon demon. I absolutely love it because of the personalities that Lemming gives her characters. Cinnamon is super fierce and independent and strong-willed, and I loved her. And I loved her cohort of companions. They all had very distinct, bold personalities. And Fallon, I bought into this little back and forth romance. I am totally down with spice in a book if I buy into the character's story, and I did here. It's very modern language, it's very mild, simple world building, but there was just enough of it, and in just the right ways that I was totally on board. You really need to go into this book with the idea you are in pure escapism mode. It's just for fun, it's for some spice. Don't expect much except a chuckle here and there and maybe a little eyebrow raise. I then went back into Southern horror mode and read In the Hour of Crows by Dana Elmendorf. This takes place June to July in the 1980s. We're back in the Appalachian Mountains. This is technically the fictional town of Blackthorn, Georgia. We're following Weatherly Wilder, who is a death talker. She can talk the dead out of people as they are dying. This is a family gift, if you want to call it that, that's passed down through the family. It comes with rules to be able to wield this power. She is also a member of a magical family, but like Bittersweet in the Hollow, they each have their own gift. Her cousin Adair is a scryer, and she sees something rather disturbing, never describes to Weatherly what it is, but shortly after she sees this thing, she is killed in an accident. Weatherly never accepts it as an accident. The real catalyst of the book is her stepping out to figure out what really happened to her cousin. I should also mention the other character of Grandma Agnes, who is just awful. But she is this strong matriarch character of the family who controls the magical recipe book. Also, another magical element are the characters of soul walkers, who are represented by Rook. I could read this book alone just for the character of Rook. I was really into his story, loved it. I definitely recommend this if you want a sweaty southern summer setting and what it is to live in a poor town when you are also looked down on within those ranks. You are the white trash of the town, and yet you also have power. How does that translate? So vacation was over by the time I was done with that book. I was back at home. I switched over to some audiobooks again to do while I was working. I then listened to Chilly Cauldron Curse by Lynn Cahoon. I don't have a lot to say about this one. It was me trying to begin a new little cozy witch mystery series. It was really just a novella. It was only a couple of hours long. I just found the story very lackluster. I didn't get drawn in by any of the characters. I don't even know really why I was supposed to care about any of them. So I don't really recommend this one. I don't plan on continuing with the series myself, but it's out there. It was only a couple of hours of listening. If you're so inclined, try it out. I may try another one in the series later if I'm bored and I run out of other series. After the disappointment of Chilly Cauldron Curse, I tried out the audiobook When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen, narrated by Carrie Young. I have to mention who it's narrated by because it was brilliantly read. This book delivered much more of what I was hoping to get from This Cursed House. I actually read them as kind of a pairing. When the Reckoning Comes is following 3 timelines, one of them being the narrator voicing slaves, then the 3 main characters, Mira, Jesse, and Celine, as they are children, and then in the present day, when Celine is having a wedding, and she wants Mira and Jesse to come to that wedding, after they've all kind of lost touch. Celine is going to have her wedding at the Woodsman Plantation. It has recently been bought and renovated and turned into this big tourist attraction where you can essentially come and watch slavery happening while you can play the role of a Southern belle or gentleman. This is kind of a painful thing for Mira and Jesse because when they were kids, they went to visit the plantation in the woods when it was an abandoned building, and something happened, pretty traumatic. So much so that Mira ends up moving away from the town. Jesse's kind of trapped there and being pretty brutally judged by the white community for what's happened. I should mention Mira and Jesse are Black. Celine is white, so you get this different dynamic of what it is like to be in the South as poor Black and poor white, both children and adults. So, anywho, Celine wants this wedding at the plantation because to her it's just a beautiful location, whereas Mira and Jesse see more of the problems, and they see things in more ways than one. They understand the real history behind this plantation, and they see ghosts. Not giving anything away by that, it is understood from the blurb that this plantation is haunted. This was a very powerful, painful book to experience. And truly, the terror of the book is not so much in the ghosts, it's in the slavery that is being represented and relived. This story is really about the slaves having a voice in the modern day and others experiencing what really happened rather than this tourist version that's been created. I really recommend this book, and I really recommend you listen to this book. Then, after that rather serious book, I wanted to dip my toes into a familiar feel-good realm. So I reread House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. If you've seen some of my other videos, you probably know that T. Kingfisher is my favorite author. House with Good Bones is a great summer read because it's about kind of a haunted, creepy garden kind of coming to life. I won't give too much away. It's a great summer read. And it takes place in North Carolina, so it was also fitting into the vibe I had been in. The main character is Samantha, or Sam. She is an archaeoentomologist, I think is what it's called. Essentially, she studies bugs and archaeology dig sites. She ends up back at her childhood home in North Carolina after a dig that she's on gets postponed because they found bones and everything has to go on hold. I just loved that the main character was this bug-loving woman. She mentions a lot how she's a heavier gal, she's independent, she just sort of does her own thing. She's used to just kind of not quite fitting in because she grew up loving bugs. So being big boned and independent, it works for her. She owns who she is and she's very comfortable with that. So love that. When Sam finds her way back home, she notices that her mother, Edith, is acting a little weird. She's being almost reverential in the memories of her mom, Sam's grandmother, Grandmay. And that's really saying something because it's very well known by everyone who ever met the woman that Grandmay was kind of a monster. She was not a nice person. But all of a sudden, Sam's mom is speaking very lovingly in memory. And she's acting weird and something is just wrong. Sam also notices that the garden, though full of gorgeous roses, it just looks unbelievable, especially for being in the South, it's completely devoid of bugs. So what's that about? You also have side characters who are just phenomenal. One of my favorite things about Kingfisher books is her development of all the different characters. It's so much more than just the main character. In fact, for me, my greatest love is all of the side characters. There's so much development and personality and wit and humor that she imbues in the characters in just a couple of sentences. So we have Phil, who is the gardener for Edith. He also ends up being a little bit of a love interest. Gail, the neighbor, who is a wildlife rehabilitator, who also has a rehabilitating vulture, Hermes. You will want to adopt a vulture after you read this book. There's even Phil's dad, who's just this like wacko end of world doomsday guy who lives across the street. He's funny too. It's really just a great suite of characters that makes the whole story a fun adventure. I won't say any more about where the story goes, I'd be giving something away, but if you want a version of Haunting, a version of a garden fighting back, a story with a strong female character, go forth and enjoy. You'll have some laughs if nothing else. that's what Kingfisher does. And then, because I was enjoying being back in the world of Kingfisher, I reread another Kingfisher, Twisted Ones. I actually reread this one because I did want to also do a review about the Appalachian folklore I mentioned earlier. So this book is in that review as well. It takes place in late spring in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. You have the main female character, Mouse, and her dog, Bongo. Another nod to T. Kingfisher. She writes great animal sidekicks. Mouse goes to her grandmother's house to clean it up after she's passed away. The grandmother was not a nice person, kind of like Grandma in the last story. And as she's cleaning out the house, she finds her step-grandfather's journal, Cotgrave. She finds Cotgrave's journal, and it's full of these rambling, weird, creepy writings. And Mouse at first thinks that maybe he was having some dementia. He just wasn't quite all there anymore. But what she reads about starts to happen around her, and she starts to realize Cotgrave may have been onto something. You also have another great cast of side characters, my favorite being Foxy, the 60-ish year old neighbor who is just bold and independent and does her own thing and doesn't care what the world thinks, and just a breath of fresh air throughout the story. You've got these creepy rock effigies that are throughout the story, and when you actually get to read the description of what the true creepy characters look like, Kingfisher gives you just enough to send your imagination racing and creep yourself out. So, like with all Kingfisher books, I can't not recommend this. My one critique is that when you are reading the sections of Cotgrave's journal in the book, they can be a little bit laborious, a little weird, but it was actually an Easter egg she put in the book because it is direct quotes from this 1904 found manuscript called The White People that kind of has its own cult following. So Kingfisher was taking liberties with that manuscript and turning it into Cotgrave's journal and re-referencing it as though it was Appalachian folklore. I was here for it. I love what Kingfisher will do, the creatures that she will create, the magic that is woven into daily life. I'm here for it. And not to be too boring about it, but I then also reread What Stalks the Deep, another T. Kingfisher. This was also for the Appalachian folklore video. Quick summary. It's the third in the Sworn Soldier series. I recommend reading the other two as well to fully appreciate this one, but it could be a standalone. You're following Alex Easton and Angus from a fictional country Galatia who are coming to West Virginia on the request of their friend Dr. Denton. His cousin Oliver has gone missing in the abandoned family coal mines of West Virginia. And what precedes is just this creepy tale, pretty much entirely taking place in a cave or in the dark of a southern night with all the weird critter sounds that happen in the South at night. I'm from Florida, so I'm very familiar with these sounds. So it's all about darkness and mystery and what happened to the cousin. And ultimately, the creature you are introduced to, that is Kingfisher's making, is a creature of both wonder and horror. And it's fantastic. Paired with the fact that, again, her characters are phenomenal. Alex and Angus especially. I will read any adventures those two go on. They're a great duo. It's a great dynamic. Go forth and enjoy. Okay, I promise I do read other authors besides T. Kingfisher. I then dove into the Southerner's Guide, book club guide, the Southerner's Guide to Hunting, oh my god. The Southerners Book Club's Guide to Hunting Vampires? The book club Southerners? The Southern Book Club. Something about being Southern and in a book club and you hunt vampires. This one was by Grady Hendrix. This one was not what I was expecting. I do have a solo review recap of that book. I wish I had known what to expect because I could have enjoyed it more. It takes place in 1990s Charleston. It spans a couple of years. It's about a Southern book club. There is a vampire. They ultimately end up hunting the vampire, but only after several years of of him just kind of doing whatever he wants because he's white and wealthy. Oh, and he's a man. The first 30% of this book I loved, was totally into it, really enjoying the characters. And then after that, it became a very frustrating book for me. So much so that around the 50% mark, I actually had to read what the ending was because I was getting so frustrated and was afraid that there was not going to be a payoff. My honest opinion, there is not a payoff. I think there were very specific choices that Grady Hendrix made in that. I think there was a reason the payoff I was wanting did not happen, but I wasn't expecting it. Again, if you want a little bit more detail about what I mean, you could watch the independent review on this, but for me, I don't think you should read this if you are just expecting a great vampire hunting romp. This one actually had a lot of pretty intense societal commentary, mostly about racism and sexism, and it was brilliantly done in that respect, but I was not prepared for my blood pressure to go up like that and have no release at the end. Then I listened to House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. This one was really disappointing for me. Again, I've got a separate review on it, so you know what you're getting into if you read this. This is really a book for those who want the story about the lusty, opulent, powerful, power-hungry side of vampirism. It also has a lot of sapphic intimacy. There is a gothic manner. I don't think it was necessarily very well done, but you have all of that setting. So if that's a story that would interest you, go for it. You'll have plenty. Your well will be filled. For me, I was expecting more of the gothic mystery that the blurb, I feel, presented. Technically, by the very end of the book, that blurb was achieved. But I had to read a lot of 50 Shades of Grey with vampires before I got to that, and that wasn't what I wanted. But follow along with Marion Shaw as she becomes a blood maid to the wealthy houses of the North to escape the horrific slums that she lives in. She becomes this blood maid. She is serving the Lady Lisbeth, or Countess Lisbeth, and essentially falls totally under the power and the spell of Lisbeth for the majority of the book until finally something else happens. I really kind of wanted to switch things up after that since I was fairly disappointed and switch to a modern day story, At the Bottom of the Garden. This one was a delightful surprise. I recommend this one for pretty much anybody. This is written by Camilla Bruce. It is telling the story of Clara Woods, who is a murderess. You know that right from the blurb of the book. She's killed people. Clara ends up adopting her two nieces, Lily and Violet, after their parents die in a tragic mountain climbing accident. It's not like Clara is doing this out of any well-being of her heart. She could not care less about these girls. She sees the money attached to them. Their dad, who is the person that Clara's related to, their dad was filthy rich, apparently. So she just sees the daughters as dollar signs. However, she takes these girls on, not realizing that Violet has started seeing ghosts and she can talk to them, and Lily can see people's emotions. What follows is a fantastic story of haunting. Violet is able to essentially release these ghost figures on the aunt, and Clara is dogged by these ghosts. And it's not the house that's haunted, it's Clara. It becomes the battle of the wills. Everyone is strong-willed in this thing in a really great way, I think. Clara, who, yeah, she's a repulsive person, but my God, she's got some spitfire in her. And the ghosts, they do too. The girls are strong and learning to have confidence and faith in themselves. Lily's 14, so she should be kind of stepping into that role. But Violet, who's only 9, and she does read like a 9-year-old, she has that internal monologue, but she also comes across in a very mature, likable, relatable way. By reading just a couple of sentences of each chapter, I could tell you whose voice we were reading because the chapters are broken up by character's perspective, and that is how well Camilla Bruce wrote these characters. I knew who we were reading within a sentence or two every time. It was a great story, real surprise. I hadn't even heard of this book. My library recommended it to me, so shout out to public libraries. Well, hey everybody! You finally get to meet Toffee. Here's one of my other kitties. He's usually sleeping at this time of day. Hi, Toffee. Say hello. My next two were pretty quick ones. These were just audiobooks I read on a day where I was doing work that audiobooks fill the time. This was continuing a witch mystery series I'd already been listening through by Angela Sanders, the Witch Way Librarian Mystery Series. I listened to 7 Year Witch and then Witch and Famous, which are the second and third books in the series. I loved the first one. I liked the second one. I started getting burned out by the third one, but I think that might be a little bit on me that I did back-to-back stories. It was just a little bit of an overload of the characters and being in that world. I definitely will still continue listening to the other books in the series. It's a really fun, light, cozy witch mystery read. If that's what you're looking for, definitely recommend this series. Next, I read Pandora by Susan Stokes-Chapman. This is a fantastic historical fiction mystery that's based on Greek myth. So you do get some of those magical moments of some mythology, supernatural elements creeping into the story. But really, for me, the power of the story was the human element. Stokes-Chapman really takes time to develop the world, so it's kind of a slow build story, but necessarily so, because she's really creating what it would be like to live as either the wealthy aristocratic people or in the slums, and what the characters do from that, their impetus for behaviors from that. It's a great story. Again, I got another review of that one independently if you're so inclined. Really, though, if you like a slow burn and you like historical fiction, you gotta read this one. It's a beautiful story about what it is to be human. Then I tackled All the Murmuring Bones by A.G. Slatter. This is part of her sourdough universe, but you don't have to actually read the books in any order. They're just taking place in the same world. This is a fantastic mermaid story that's also incorporating a lot of other Celtic and Slavic folklore. Plus, there's the elements that are her own bits of magic in the sourdough universe. So lots of layers, lots of rich world building. Always love that about an A.G. Slatter. This one I debate with whether or not listening by audio would have been a better experience because it is in a very storytelling format. The sentence structure can be a little odd, so just expect that going into it. It took me a little aback at first, but the whole premise of the book keeps tapping back to this folklore collection of children's stories that are passed within the family, and as such, there's a very storytelling vibe to this story. Also, you would have a narrator pronounce the words for you because there's a lot of stuff I don't actually know how to pronounce name-wise or folklore character-wise. So I kind of wish I could have actually heard it pronounced. The female main character is Mirren, an 18-year-old woman. Fantastic main character. Adore her. It really reads very much like a mystery because you don't get a lot of internal monologue for her. It's more like you're just reading her actions as she's doing things. But it actually adds to the atmosphere of independence and determination from her. She's just getting things done. Usually I depend on an internal monologue to really get that connection with a character. It totally worked for me here to just read what she was doing and be awed by her. Basically, Mirren is a part of the O'Malley family. It is known that at some point somewhere in their past, some pact had to have been made with the Mer people that kept them immune from the dangers of the ocean and kept them in some relative wealth and prosperity. As such, there's very much this kind of inbred thing going on that everyone within the family marries within the family to keep the bloodline strong and benefiting from this generations old pact. The family name is running out though, and Mirren is among the last. The story starts with Mirren's grandfather dying, and she's basically left with just her grandmother, Aoife, I think is how you pronounce it. Basically, Mirren is just waiting for the grandmother to now die so that she can finally leave this dilapidated, falling apart manor that used to once be grand and have all of this power, but it's just been dwindling and diminishing over time. And she just wants to walk away from it. She doesn't care about the power or the money. She just wants to have her own life. And she thus far has lived as the good girl who does as she's told, but always knowing she was going to get away. She was going to have an escape. The grandmother, however, has other ideas for her, and the story that ensues is Mirren finding her independence, going on her own adventure. She's seeking her parents. She was left with the grandparents to be raised, and she doesn't really know why. There was never that story. So she goes forth to find her parents, find out the mystery of her origin, and you end up on this grand adventure that just touches on so many different folklores and magics and power choices and her growing as a character, and I just loved it. Definitely recommend this to anyone who loves fantasy, magic, strong female character, of course, mermaids. You'll enjoy it. The last full book I read was Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke. I actually didn't really have this one on my radar too much because it's not something I thought I would really enjoy, but then it was there at my library. I picked it up. I'm so glad I did. This was not what I was expecting. Honest to goodness, I have no idea how this book should even be marketed. I swear it was one of the creepiest books I've read all summer. Is it literary fiction? Is it thriller, mystery, horror? It's fantastic, but you have to go into it knowing that the main character, Natalie, she's pretty repulsive. There's nothing likable about this woman, but what made it work for me is that she also doesn't like anything else. She hates everyone and everything, including herself. And that, for me, is what made it not only tolerable to read, but it also made her internal monologues just flat out funny. I laughed out loud with this book. Was it a comedy? It wasn't a comedy, but it was good. This is one of those trad wife stories. It's about living in the modern day, picking which lane you're going to be in to try to find your own success, presenting a certain front to the public to have that success, and how it affects everyone around you. She is a successful trad wife in the modern day. She wakes up in the past, but in a home and with children and a husband that all ring kind of true, but something's wrong, and there's no power and there's no lights, and oh my God, what's happening? This thing stayed a mystery to me right until the end. I did not figure out the ending at all, and I'm usually pretty good at that. This thing, I was on a ride, and I would take the ride again. It was great. The last book for the month was actually my one and only DNF, which is unfortunate. I tried to read Hex by Thomas Hovelt. I got 17% into it, and guys, nothing drew me into the story. The blurb of the book told me more about the witch and what was happening than the first 16% of the book. Where was the story? Everything was very vague, this circuitous storytelling where this witch is mentioned in multiple different scenarios in this town that she's haunting. And I'm all about a witch and haunting. I mean, haunting is my favorite kind of story. And the idea of a witch haunting a whole town and keeping kind of a curse over everyone and what is her backstory, that's what I was going in for. I'm 16% in, and all of this circumreferential storytelling that's never really addressing who the witch is, just made it so I felt bored and disconnected from the story. It didn't help that there really wasn't much character development either. You're introduced to lots of different characters who live in the town as they're each having their interactions with this witch haunting, but you're not really given details that make you feel connected to them. I don't really feel I knew much of anything about any of the characters except a few male characters whom, quite frankly, just came across as real jerks. I think all of the vagueness at the beginning was meant to be adding to the mystery and building curiosity, if anything, adding to a gothic creeping dread. It just did not do that for me. I felt completely bereft of this story. Then finally, that last 1% of the book I read is when we get to the witch's backstory. We're told what's really going on. I felt like I was reading a textbook. It was so dry and this happened, then this happened, then this happened. I mean, how do you make a story that creepy so boring? So finally, after I get to this point where the witch's backstory is finally told, what really should be the moment I am in this story, I'm in the author's groove, I am there, I closed the book. I was done. There were also like a dozen different times where supposedly something really funny was said, but I didn't even know it was something funny or a joke until I'm then reading the reactions of the other characters. It's just so uproariously funny that they're spitting out their drinks or they can't breathe. It wasn't funny. And there's only so many times I can read that before it's kind of like watching bad stand-up comedy. Like, you just start feeling bad for the characters. I know that this was a translated work. I don't know if that's why my feelings were this way. Was it, I mean, to be cliche, was something lost in translation? It just didn't work for me. If you read this book and you really feel like, no, that was the moment, it got really good, read it again, please let me know. I would love to read a great witch haunting a town story. That's just not what I was getting. That's it for me. That was my month of July. If you have any comments, anything you want to add, go ahead and put it below. Otherwise, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.